Grade 10, Chapter 7, Glimpses of India. In this chapter, we learn in part 1 about a baker from Goa. A baker from Goa revolves around the relevance of a baker in the Goan culture, which dates back to the time when Portuguese ruled over the city of Goa. The Portuguese may have left, but the bread makers continue to have an inevitable stature. In this story, the author recalls or recollects his childhood days and their excitement on seeing the baker. They were enthusiastic to the point that they would run to him as soon as they woke up without even brushing their teeth. Let us read the story. When we read about Goa, what images of people, of places come to your mind? When we think of our country, we imagine how beautiful our country is, and we can visualize how people of our country are. What parts of India have you lived in or visited? Can you name some popular tourist destinations? Yes. If we read the first chapter, we can visualize how Goa is and how it was in the past and how the people were. It is the most visited place. It is the favorite tourist spot or destination. When we read the history of the place, we learn that the Portuguese have also played a part in the history of our country. Here in this chapter, the author recollects the childhood days when the children used to cry out of excitement and run towards the gate of their houses to get the bread. This is a pen portrait of the traditional Goan village baker who still has an important place in his society. So if you read the story, you will get to know that how the bakers used to bake the cake or the breads in Goa and why they have been respected and regarded in Goa. They play a vital role in the culture and traditional presentations when it comes to marriages or special occasions. The people of Goa exchange gifts. They prefer to have sweet bread, bread rings, and cakes on the auspicious occasions. And this is why the Goan village baker has an important place in the society. The author in the story shares the experience. What is the experience of the author all about? Our elders are often heard reminiscing nostalgically about those good old Portuguese days, the Portuguese and their famous loaves of bread. Those eaters of loaves might have vanished, but the makers are still there. So, for the author, it is an auspicious occasion to have bread. He feels that the people in Goa are so very much fond of bread that they cannot do without it. The author recollects how his elders were often heard reminiscing nostalgically about those old Portuguese days when the Portuguese used to have loaves of bread. Those famous loaves of bread that the bakers in Goa used to cook. Those eaters of loaves might have vanished, he says, but the makers are still there. So if you read the history, you will learn how the people used to cherish the moments, and the author is still able to recall those days. The author feels that the days have passed, the eaters of those laws might have vanished, but there are still many bakers in Goa, those who still make the bread in the old traditional way. During our childhood days in Goa, the bakers used to prepare bread. So, this is a time where the author describes how he, as a child, was always excited to have bread. The baker used to be our friend, he says. Not only a friend, a companion, and a guide. He used to come at least twice a day. Once when he set out in the morning on his selling round, and then again when he returned after emptying his huge basket. The jingling thud of his bamboo woke us up from sleep, and we ran to meet and greet him. Why was it so? Was it for the love of the loaf? So the question that is raised by the author is that why we as children used to run to get the bread? Was it just because we loved to have the loaf, or it was just the jingling thud of the bamboo of the baker made them wake up from their sleep? And as they had made friends with the bakers, they were happy to greet him or greet them. So the author is still pondering over why they as children used to do so. Those old days, the age old time, tested furnaces that were used to prepare bread are still available in Goa. Those age old time tested furnaces still exist in Goa. The fire in the furnaces has not yet been extinguished. Means people in Goa still use those furnaces to bake the bread. The third and jingle of the reminiscing nostalgically thinking fondly of the past, the traditional baker's bamboo, hurling his arriving in the morning, can still be heard in some places. So for the author, nothing has changed. Till date, people in Goa wait for the bakers when they hear the jingle of the bamboo or jingle third of the bamboo of the baker, they rush to get the bread. Same is the scene that the author had experienced in his childhood days, and he is unable to forget those golden days of his life. I can still recall the typical fragrance of those loaves for the elders and the bangles for the children. Then we did not even care to brush our teeth or wash our mouths properly. And why should we? Who would take the trouble of plucking the mango leaf from the toothbrush? Okay, so in those days, they might be chewing the stem, or they might be using the toothbrush to brush their teeth. But it was a kind of painstaking for them. They did not want to wait to clean their mouth before they could have the loaves of bread or the bangles of bread. The tiger never brushed his teeth. This is what he used to think when he was a child. Hot tea could wash and clean up everything so nicely after all. So the best way to clean the teeth was to have a cup of tea or gargle it. The hot tea would clean the mouth nicely, he said. So this is what we learned from the chapter that children were so very excited to have the bread or loaves of bread in the morning that they often failed to brush their teeth or wasted their time to do anything else in the morning. So, in part one, we learned about how the bakers in Goa worked and what did children do to have fun in the morning and how excited they were to have the bread in the morning. In part two, we will learn about Kurg. The narrator here states that Kurg is midway between Mysore and the coastal town of Mangalore. It sits in a piece of heaven that must have drifted from the kingdom of God. This land of rolling hills is inhabited by a proud race of martial men, beautiful women, and wild creatures. So Kurg or Kodagu is the smallest district of Karnataka. It is the home to green or evergreen rainforests, species, and coffee plantations. There are many creatures that are found in Kurg. It is a heavenly place. During the monsoons, it pours enough to keep many visitors away. Means there is a downpour and is flooded during the monsoon season. And this is how the visitors often plan not to visit Kurg during the monsoon season. The season of joy commences from September and continues till March. So the people, those who visit Kurg, they often plan their trip during the time when the season is pleasant and worth visiting, when the forest is green and the creatures are rejoicing during the pleasant season, that is between September till March. Kurg is overcrowded. The weather is perfect with some showers thrown in for good measure. The air breathes of invigorating coffee. So the coffee plantation that they have in Kurg makes the place worth visiting. The fragrance makes the weather pleasant. Coffee estates and the colonial bungalows stand tucked under tree canopies in prime corners. So this is how the author states that Kurg is the most beautiful place and it is good to visit the worth visiting places during September and March. As we read further, we learn about how the people of Kurg are. The fiercely independent people of Kurd are possibly of Greek or Arabic descent. As as one story goes, a part of Alexander's army moved south along the coast and settled here when return became impractical. So they had their settlements in Kurd. These people married among the locals and their culture is apparent in the martial traditions, marriage, and religious rites which are distinct from the Hindu mainstream. So their outer appearance, their lifestyle is different from the Hindu mainstream. Why? Because they are possibly of Greek or Arabic descent. So if you go through the textbook, you will see that usually the people of Kurd are dressed like this. They dress up in different style and they are very strong and presentable. The theory of Arab origin draws support from the long black coat drifted from being carried along gently by air marshal, having to do with war canopies, roof-like coverings that form shelters lying here. Best mainstream a tradition which traditional Kurgi dress most people follow, glimpses of India with embroidered waist belt worn by the Kodavos. So this is how they dress up. They have a waist belt worn by the Kodavos, and usually the waist belts are embroidered, so they are extremely beautiful. And those are also known as upia. It resembles the Kufia worn by the Arabs and the Kurds. Kurgis prefer to live in a beautiful house. They live in beautiful houses. Kurgi homes have a tradition of hospitality and they are more than willing to recount numerous tales of valor related to their sons and fathers. So, this is how they play a vital role in the defense service. After reading about how Kurd is, we move on to Assam and we learn about the tea plantation in Assam. Pranjal, a youngster from Assam, is Rajveer's classmate at school in Delhi. Pranjal's father is the manager of a tea garden in Upper Assam, and Pranjal has invited Rajveer to visit his home during the summer vacation. They are commuting by a train. As they are traveling by a train, they hear the vendor call out for a cup of tea. He came up to their window and asked whether they would prefer to have a cup of tea. Give us 2 cups, Pranjal said. They sipped the steaming hot liquid. Almost everyone in their compartment was drinking tea too. So this is how the story begins. Pranjal and Rajveer are traveling by a train. Pranjal is from Assam and Rajveer is his classmate who is accompanying him and is ready to visit Assam. Pranjal's father is a manager of a tea garden and he is there to welcome the children, those who are visiting his home during the summer vacation. Do you know that over 8 crore cups of tea are drunk every day throughout the world? Rajveer said. While they were sipping the cup of tea, Rajveer asked whether Pranjal was aware that 8 crore cups of tea is consumed every day throughout the world. View! Exclaimed Pranjal. Tea really is very popular. The train pulled out of the station and Pranjal buried his nose in his detective book again. Rajveer too was an ardent fan of detective stories, but at the moment he was keener on looking at the beautiful scenery. So at that moment when they are talking about tea, Pranjal had already buried his nose in his detective book again. Although Rajveer too was very fond of reading detective stories, but at that moment he was keener on looking at the beautiful scenery. It was a magnificent view. Against the backdrop of densely wooded hills, a sea of tea bushes stretched as far as the eye could see. Dwarfing the tiny tea plants were tall, sturdy shade trees, and amidst the orderly rows of bushes, bushly moved doll-like figures. So here we learn that as they were traveling by the train, what they could see was magnificent. And apart from this, they could see that there were many tea plantations and the tea bushes had stretched far and wide, as far as their eye could see. It was a heavenly place, they felt, and they started discussing more about it. Assam has the largest concentration of plantations in the world. You will see enough gardens to last you a lifetime. I have been reading as much as I could about tea, Rajveer said. No one really knows who discovered tea, but there are many legends. Legends are the tales. There are stories about who discovered tea and how people started consuming it around the world. So the boys were conversing about this, and all of a sudden, they started discussing about the legend. The train clattered into the Mariani Junction. The boys collected collected their luggage and pushed their way to the crowded platform. But before they reached Assam, they discussed about the legend. And the legend was all about the Bodhidharma. He was a monk. As he was meditating, he was unable to concentrate onto the meditation. As he could not meditate, he tried to pick out his eyelids, and as his eyelids did roll on the ground, it is known that 10 tea plants did grow at the place where his eyelids rolled. And this is how people learnt about tea. And it is also believed that people who consume tea cannot sleep and can keep awake for long. So after reaching Ashram, Pranjal got to learn more about the tea plantations in Assam. As the train clattered into the Mariani Junction, they were welcomed by Pranjal's parents, who were waiting for them eagerly. Soon they were driving towards the Dekbari, the tea garden managed by Pranjal's father. An hour later, the car veered sharply off the main road. They crossed a cattle bridge and entered the Dekabri tea estate. Now, Pranjal was highly interested in knowing about the tea gardens, and when they reached Rajveer's place, here Pranjal's parents were excited to meet Pranjal and Rajveer. Pranjal's father explained how they grew tea in the tea garden. Pranjal's father explained to Rajveer how the things were in Assam and how people kept themselves occupied plucking the tea leaves in the tea gardens.